Welcome, everyone. This is Danny and Karl with GetWisdom, and today we're going to continue with our channeling series. And today, Karl is going to channel Helena Blavatsky, who was quite a famous woman in the late 1800s, and some would cite her as a contributing figure to the New Age movement with a lot of her writings and her organization with many different cultures, many different peoples of the world, and an effort to combine science and spiritualism, and presenting a cosmology through her organization, her Theosophy organizations. I think it's called the Theosophical Society. I'm sure I'm torturing that word as well. But but anyway, she wrote a book called Cosmogenesis, among many other books that people still talk about to this day. So she's our topic for today, and she does talk about the Bible, and she was also very interested in the Hindu religions, the religions of India, including Hinduism, and she had some pretty notable followers back in her day. So with that, Karl, thanks so much for doing this with us again today. And maybe we could talk a little bit about this topic before we start the channeling.
Sure. Yeah, it's Theosophical Society is her kind of namesake organization, not namesake, but her brainchild and the sort of the founding leader who brought forth these concepts. And I think as a broad interpretation, what she was wanting to do and why it had traction is something still very much needed, to have an integration of science and things of a spiritual nature, as well as those other aspects that society engages with transactions and commerce and all of the other things necessary for a civilization in the way it's organized and maintained and disciplined. So there's nothing wrong with the idea of taking good ideas and a desire to understand truth and look broadly, look across the landscape. And this is, I think, more of a manipulation and a disinformation campaign effort to have everything so compartmentalized, because you need to understand divine principles to do almost anything well, to make the most of it and really be effective, and to make it more powerful and a deeper endeavor in some way or another. And to divorce the spiritual from everything else and shove it off to one day a week, and it's in its own little special building, and that's where you think about it. And the rest of the week, you're rendering unto Caesar, so to speak, and you don't think about the Almighty or whatever. And that's a completely corrupted perspective. It really, really is. Because the whole idea of religion has been corrupted as well. And that's partly why that is so. So much of religion is focused on worship, which I'm told by Creator is really beside the point. We're children and products of divine consciousness. We're a part of the divine. And so to just worship that is like a major focus of our spiritual life is wasted motion, because Creator doesn't need that. Creator doesn't need us bowing down and spending a lot of time, expressing our awe and our, forever.
Right. And humans don't need it either. It contributes nothing to our to our growth
exactly.
or well-being.
That's why
it's kind of like a holding pattern,
Yeah, it's wasted motion, really. And it's not that Creator doesn't care if you like the idea of God and want to feel grateful. I mean, you should treat the Almighty just like you would a friend or a loved one or a family member who does something for you and cares about you and so on. You should express gratitude and thanks when it's appropriate. But you don't spend the entirety of your relationship only doing that, because that makes you a kind of a humble supplicant and keeps the Almighty distant from you as some object of veneration and not more of a partner in your life. And so that's our big message with Get Wisdom, to partner with Creator. So the people who wanted to integrate these ideas and find other ways to explore and exploit good perspectives, I think we're on the right track. The thing that is always a danger, though, is the level of corruption that creeps in to all who would attempt to make the world better.
Yeah, they make themselves the focus of the interloper's attention by doing so.
Unfortunately. And so this is how all the good ideas down through the ages have gotten a treatment by the cabal to manipulate them, to kind of interweave some disinformation and some potential poison pills that end up tainting the endeavor and misdirecting it in some way. And it's, people have called this the law of unintended consequences, which is kind of a disinformation campaign, I think, of itself.
Right.
Because that is really the hallmark of corruption and manipulation.
Yeah, it's a head nod to that phenomena that whenever something,
Right.
No good idea goes unpunished, so to speak.
Yeah. And that's another tell, that there's something weird going on in the world.
Yeah.
That you don't get a benefit from contributing a benefit,
Yeah.
That somehow you end up suffering because you tried to do good. And we don't realize there is a hidden hand, a force of darkness that intrudes. So I think it'll be interesting to talk with Helena Blavatsky about her life and her intentions.
Yeah.
And let her share with us what she sees now, looking down from the heavenly realm at her life and how she spent her time and things she worked on and how she sees that.
Yeah.
And what the influences might have been along the way she wasn't even aware of that were going on.
Well, yeah, and that's an interesting point. And I hope she talks about that, although I don't have any questions specific to that point. But we've asked beings in the light about that. Like, how could you have gone through your entire life doing all this research and not discovered the fact that we're being manipulated by a bunch of aliens? We've had answers to that question before. This might be a good one for her. There are some questions that kind of that dance around that topic, but there's no direct questions towards that in the 6 questions that I have for her today. One of the things that you were talking about earlier when you were working on a transcript was the fact that we have been dumbed down, and there was something I was going to mention about that as it relates to her. But I know what it was. There are some people who've done research on her work, and they say that she talks about and alludes to things in the sciences and physics, I think in physics in particular, where she's giving an explanation as best she can, pointing out the fact that our understanding of the physical world and what we've been able to understand through the methodology of science is lacking. It's not there. They're talking about her describing and talking about things that where science is far, far behind. And I thought it was kind of interesting because we hear so often is that if only our spirituality could catch up with our science, then the world would be a better place. But she's actually positing a different, I think, approach to this idea is that it's actually science that hasn't caught up with some of the features and principles of spirituality. And you were talking about you working on the Sitchin's transcript earlier before we started recording, and about how one part of the agenda for us was to dumb us down.
Yeah, this is a deliberate genetic modification of the human genome way, way, way back in history. And it was to make us more compliant, more cooperative, and limit our reach, limit our power dramatically. And of course, it did that. So it was to enslave us because they wanted us to be actual slaves and do dirty work for them, like mining natural resources and so on that they had a use for. So this has persisted to this day. But the idea of science versus spirituality is a fascinating one, because I, as a scientist, working in that career all my life, and then having a spiritual awakening later along, I was very struck by how eloquent and elegant the divine realm and its exposition of reality actually is. The problem is we don't get the true version of that from our religions. They're dealing with scriptures that were written for other reasons, not to be a textbook of science or to understand the natural world. They were more a description of life to serve as a warning and a sort of a moral guide to how to live and how to deal with one another, and with a lot of politics mixed in. And that was used in various ways as object lessons and metaphor and parables and so on. But it was written, they were written in a simpler era, a simpler time, when science really wasn't practiced as a discipline by humanity. So you can't fault the scripture for lacking an emphasis or even a treatment of science per se, but rather it was largely a whistleblowing document across the board. The Torah, the Bible, the Quran. It was to talk about the interlopers, both in spirit form as well as extraterrestrial beings. And in those days, there wasn't really much of an appreciation for how that could be. They were viewed more or less as gods, these beings that came in craft and interspersed among us and took over. And so there are various terms used in the scriptures about that. The Nephilim, these are hybrid beings of humans that were the offspring of a mating by the Anunnaki with human females. And these are the giants that were upon the earth in those days. Well, they're still here, but they don't come out in the open because they'd be noticed. And but they run the world from behind the scenes. And they've kept science largely from us, like everything else that's useful to know. So the people who want to bring forth that truth have a huge headwind because it's not supposed to be done. And the way this is dealt with is to corrupt the thinking of those innovators who know there's something more, that science is lacking, it's falling down. There's other things that aren't being addressed that seem very, very important, and it's very true. Science ignores the most important things and deals more with trivial things and side issues. And it's because they think of these big problems as insoluble. But there's also a misdirection to turn away from them and not see them as important to explore. Things like consciousness, what that consists of, where it comes from, and what it can do. And so you see very little serious research done on the paranormal phenomena and even the subconscious mind of human beings, which is the gateway to your intuitive reach. And that's a corruption. So, so I think her frustration was bumping into the reality that we're constrained as a culture across the board. And So I'm sure she'll weigh in on these issues because she has the opportunity now to see the whole panorama and put some of the, excuse me, the work of her day in context with all the influences that hold down our advancement and really mislead. It's so unfortunate because there's so much more we could do. We're loving beings, that's our origin, and to not live that way is a travesty and a degradation of our own soul. And we're led into that by our leadership and the teachings of society and the slanted view of things. Yep. You know, wars are inevitable. You might as well get good at it. You know, develop those super weapons and so on. And it's a treadmill. It keeps us all fighting with one another, and it's a result of an external influence, not a human fault or failing.
Yeah, or innate human characteristics.
Yeah,
which is a lot of people like to hang it on something like that, a notion like that, which is, you know, we've discovered is more disinformation.
Yeah. So we need good teachers. We just need the right ones, though.
Yeah, and they're few and far between, and the ones who do pop up, perhaps she might be a good example, get corrupted in some fashion or not. To what extent, we'll maybe find out in this channeling. So with that, we have 6 questions today. Maybe we should go ahead and get started.
All right. I will take a moment to get in the state of consciousness I need to connect with her through Creator of all that is. That is how I do my channeling, to go to the Almighty and ask to be connected by the Almighty to guarantee an accurate target and that the connection is protected from outside interference and manipulation and held safe. And that's very important because most channelers don't do that, and they end up talking to lower level beings. And once that happens, they're getting lots of information. It's fed to them like pablum, you know, something that's uplifting and interesting maybe, and they feel like they're doing great and they're in awe of it, and they've got a true friend, and they'll go back to their source over and over and over and not realize that it's likely an extraterrestrial psychic assigned to do hand holding, because they're not supposed to be using intuition. That's a danger to the cabal. So they'll be minded. And so this is a trap. Most of the channeled information is reworked spiritual principles that the extraterrestrials have learned from us through the ages. And they just sort of update it and put it into different formats and ways of expressing it and feed it up as new information to the channelers who come seeking enlightenment. And they get a lot of encouragement. And it all sounds wonderful because there is a basis in truth for much of it. And so it's very clever. It's a very clever deception. If they tried to introduce dark ideas, people would run the other way because people have an inner truth detector. You know, we're pretty good at sensing when something is off. You know, that there's some kind of evil going on. And so because we're in such a contrast with most channelers, we have this problem ourselves that we look like bad guys. You know, we look like we're dark. We must be corrupted to think there's something wrong with channeling, and some of the new age ideas are shallow or whatever we might learn from the Almighty. But the problem is there are very few who see there is an issue like this. And the world is really unprepared then and vulnerable because this lack of awareness makes everyone just keep going as usual and play right into the hands of the interlopers who try to corrupt things. So that's kind of, you know, why I'm going through the song and dance here. This is no small thing. And it's rare to get accurate information this way, in fact. So I will do my best, and we'll see if Helena Blavatsky can come forward and speak with us now.
Okay.
This is Helena Blavatsky.
Thank you for joining us. Were you able to transition successfully, and what were you expecting upon your death in comparison to what actually happened?
I was not able to transition directly to the higher planes. I was cast into darkness and was savagely attacked by dark spirit beings. This was not at all what I expected during life to happen. I envisioned a grand ascension of my soul essence and to see new wonders and have a glorious future. I was unable to mount such thoughts on my passing because I lost my ability to think in the old way with words and was then solely in a differing mode of function. This is disorienting for many, many people. The lucky who are high enough in vibration and preparedness will be inspired by sensing loving beings around them, shielding them, and inviting an interaction to raise them further and escort them where they need to go. If people are disoriented, unhappy, impaired in some way, or diminished through long struggle with illness, the decline with aging, and perhaps in emotional anguish, thinking too much about old regrets, lost opportunities, failings, disappointments, or suffering profound loneliness, having lost loved ones, and perhaps being estranged from prior friends and family. There are many reasons for people falling short when they transition. It is a consequence of their own doing in how they experience the world. Much of that stimulation and sources of problems is beyond their control. But being unable to control the self is a major hazard. It is possible to ride the waves and stay above the fray, so to speak. But it does not take too much to push someone out of alignment. And that was my difficulty at the end and my undoing for a time. So I went through a nightmarish experience and was targeted all the more because of my attempt to uplift others and to be an innovator in thought to advance the cause of human life with the grand plans I had for fostering the enlightenment of all who were not seeing the sum total of the collective experience through history regarding spirituality in particular and the various modes of expression, and that many teachings of wisdom were neglected or absent from the major religions. So this was always deeply troubling to me during my life and became a focus of my work and my efforts, but was not sufficient to save me at this time of difficulty. This is a state of imbalance and limitation at first. It takes time to reorient when you leave the physical body, if you are not used to doing so routinely, as with astral travel. And so, even under those circumstances, if one is set upon in earnest with a high level interest in holding you down and holding you back, you will have a major struggle. And this befell me. Eventually, I was rescued and raised up, and is a blessing beyond description. No one should be in that state of being pummeled, tortured, tormented, and caused to suffer with no let up, no time out, no cessation for rest and recuperation. It is a constant battle of wills, an assault on the being on every level. This is the mentality of the dark forces working against humanity. When you face it directly and are defenseless, you will learn this great truth in the hardest way possible. My fondest wish for all listening to my words is to heed the warning, to find a way to partner with the divine and prepare yourself for this journey. It is no different than the journey during life. You are under siege there as well. And most people succumb to spirit possession in the course of life, often starting in infancy. It is more difficult to cope with when in a state of disorientation. And that makes the transition period one of greater vulnerability without preparation in advance. If you simply say prayers requesting your safety to make your way home to the heavenly realm, this can be granted and may well be all you need. It is a simple step to take, but fewer and fewer people are aware of this phenomenon and the challenges. You can be in the know, so to speak, and benefit from what we are telling you. We wish you all well, to not fear your journey home. It is one of tremendous significance and one of a culmination in accomplishment, being part of the human enterprise to advance the reality of human as a race of beings created for high purpose, but struggling for its existence to continue. You are adding your part to things, and you deserve the highest of praise and the greatest of rewards. But you must find your way home to savor your glory. We are showing you the way.
Okay, thank you. Some claim that your teachings pointed to scientific principles and discoveries in physics not yet considered. including, for example, temporal geometry or the geometry of multidimensional time. Would you now say that this is true?
It is absolutely true. And in fact, in my time as a physical human, contemplating these deeper perspectives that have been originated again and again by many intuitives, given guidance from higher sources to see something about the makeup of the universe and its inner workings, over and over pointed human towards avenues for exploration that would springboard them forward into a vast array of possibilities. There are two difficulties that have been met all along the way. One is that much information of this kind has been suppressed. Authors, scholars, innovators, the creative geniuses are given special attention to suppress them, to sequester them, to sideline them, and if possible, to corrupt them and find a way to destroy them. The second difficulty is humans are ill-equipped to deal with the advanced knowledge that the divine consists of and is available freely to the light beings who continue to explore and increase the store of knowledge and awareness, which becomes an instant sharing with all. It is the nature of consciousness to be unified. So any isolated experience of consciousness will be referenced by the collective, incorporated, and potentially integrated in thinking as well. You live lives of separation. It is a foreign existence to the workings of the universe. It is a corruption and a diminishment to make you an island of consciousness within a frail human body, largely disconnected from other human beings and with the divine realm in particular. You have speech, you have sight, you have the teachings of language and the various forms of written expression through the internet, publishing, and the media as a whole. This pales in comparison to the unified consciousness that is the province of the light beings and creator as a part of it. Science has been held back all along by the human level of meager capability and function. So the idea of science being inadequate is a truth and a central dilemma of great importance that needs to be understood by everyone. You see the trappings of your world, the electronics in particular, as forms of miracle. And in a sense, this is true, but it is the divine miracle of possibility in energy and its expression. And human ingenuity played a role in bringing about these devices, technologies, and capabilities. But they pale in comparison to the power of consciousness. This you can only work with through yourself, your own being, and unfortunately have been corrupted and diminished to limit this reach. So in my day, I was aware of the gaps that existed and had an inner knowing and encouragement through the divine to put forward these kinds of ideas, to dust off the old perspectives, the seeing of the finer workings and organization, the organizing principles of the universe being describable through mathematics, through sacred geometry, and through the interplay energetically of the mind with matter. These are a given because they are the makeup of the universe entirely. It is all created, supported, and made to function through the actions of consciousness. That is not to say it is only an idea and something imaginary, and that you are not real, but somehow in Creator's mind as a kind of video game. It is real. It is palpable. You can touch it. You can feel it. You can witness it. You can interact with it. And know that it is a combination of internal and external expressions of energy. It is deathly real because you are perishable. And it matters what you do with your life as a physical being. But to understand the deeper workings in the organization can advance human knowledge and human culture materially. This is being denied you. And this is true of all of the older so-called esoteric knowledge. That is a kind of term that has become pejorative, implying that it is something one does as a hobby or an entertainment like poetry with little intrinsic value other than as entertainment. When in fact, both are descriptions of the profound. Both are an expression of greater depth of reason, imagination, and knowledge. And both are divine. When you lack the perspective to fully appreciate the universe, you can easily succumb to simple misdirections that it is only a material world, that life ends with death, is final and insurmountable, and you will be no more. When the opposite is the truth, that you cannot be killed. You will live here or you will live elsewhere. How you live is what matters. Knowing the greater purpose of things and the greater wisdom in the creation of the universe and how it operates functionally will serve you greatly. But where do you see this discussed, let alone taught? You will not find it in your institutions. It has been relegated to a sideline that is optional but not endorsed. That is a purposeful corruption and deception to reorder priorities, to make the trivial the goal and the profound almost unknown and never given any kind of support by the established institutions. This is no accident. It is not ignorance or the prejudice of prior culture resisting change. It is a deliberate corruption and manipulation to subjugate humanity and to hide the deepest secrets and the greatest sources of power. This is no accident. It is purposeful. It is a deception. So in my pursuits, I was corrupted and I was manipulated and I was held back again and again and again in many, many ways. And it was because I was a seeker. I came into life to be a bringer of truth, a rediscoverer of truth, but then to add my own wisdom. This is done by many over and over again. Few succeed beyond a mere beginning. And that is because they are noticed and then are dealt with. This is the fate befalling the free thinker. The so-called free thinkers are reminding people of reality, because reality is not truly part of your world or the discussion. You have been trained to act a part in a kind of stage play that gives you roles and boundaries. It defines what goals are worth pursuing and what are not. And always there is the imperative to eke out a living, to survive in a world where everyone is literally on the edge. There are a few who are wealthy, but the vast majority of people struggle from day to day to make a living and survive with basic creature comforts. This is not a world to take pride in. This is a world that is artificial and but a semblance of what is possible with true freedom, true liberty. That is why the idea of liberty must be fought, and is, again and again and again. Wherever the idea of liberty surfaces, it is mocked. It is condemned as a kind of folly. It is twisted through propaganda to be seen as evil, as though people were going off on their own in some kind of rogue agenda when they need to be working for the collective and helping one another. The question is, do you want to help one another as prison inmates? Or do you want to be truly free? perhaps out on your own, living by your wits, but breathing free air and knowing your accomplishments are truly yours and not sharing a piece of the mediocrity that society engages in creating.
Thank you. Would a better understanding of physics and the phenomena of time in the general population reveal the need for and value of prayer and a partnership with the divine realm?